And we're back again for Annotated Bibliographies, which is your other supplemental assignment that goes with your argument paper. Now, unlike your proposal, which will be turned in ahead of time, your annotations can be turned in with your argument paper. And they're essentially an exercise to help you keep track of your sources, to compare them, and to evaluate both their credibility and their relevance. So let's look at what I'm actually expecting in your annotations. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So Annotated bibliographies essentially are short but detailed descriptions of each of your sources. This can actually be included in your references or works cited page, or you can submit them separately in their own file. That's also fine. I will accept either as long as I get them. The paragraph length on average would be 100 to 200 words. So I say on average, particularly sort of mean average, in that as long as I can look at all of them and they're close to similar lengths. So let's say you have one that's 90 words, but one that's 150 words, or one that's 180 and one that's 100. They're all falling around that range. So we're fine. Obviously, you wouldn't want to have one that's 20 words and one that's 250. That's a little off. But when we say in the range, close to 100 to 200. So it's really actually not that hard to hit your 100 words, given that there are 3 parts to the annotation that you need to include. The first part is just a basic summary, 1 to 2 sentences. What conclusions or main points does this piece reach? So you have your citation and then you go, Smith argues that he includes this, and this in order to suggest that this. 1 to 2 sentences. That's all I need. The hard part really comes from the analysis and reflection sections. The analysis, or where you analyze another 1 to 2 sentences, is where you're looking at the quality of your source. Or credibility. So that's what we're looking for here. We're looking at things like, is the source reliable? How readable is this source? Do there appear to be any biases? What kind of tone do they seem to be using? What's the quality of their information? Is there any unique formatting or elements in the structure or style that stands out? How well do they support, or can I clearly identify their methodology? What is it? Why is this methodology working? So essentially, you're taking some of the criticism, critical thinking that we did in your first paper with the documentary analysis and applying it to your sources here. Then there's the reflection. So this is another 1 to 2 sentences that is about the relevance of this source to your paper. What are you getting out of it? Why, out of all the sources available, are you choosing this one? What does it add that other sources do not? Because that's something we should look for, is essentially how this source does something that's different, because your sources should be doing something different. If you get to your reflections and find out 3 of your sources all sound the same, maybe you only need 1 of them. In which case now you're leaving room for more varied sources, or maybe you need to look back to your methodology to see what kind of information you need to hit, or what data you haven't included, or how to beef up your reasoning or your logic. So again, how it really relates specifically to your paper, that's really what I'm looking for. Sometimes how it changed your perspective, that's fine. It's really not the priority though. The other thing is to be specific. You don't want to just say, I will be using this to support my thesis. Yes, every source should be there to support your thesis. We're looking for things like, I will be using this to represent a counter argument on this and this. I'll be using the anecdotal evidence here to I'll be outlining how the statistics presented in this paper represent or indicate this point. Then one thing that you can actually do is, if you'll notice, is you can use I or my. In my paper, I'll be using this source too. So one of the few times I encourage you to actually use those pronouns because they're accurate to what you need to be looking at in the reflection. Couple tips: try not to use quotes, only key or unique phrases. Because again, you'll quote in your paper. You shouldn't be doing that in your annotations, the same way that you won't be making the argument in your annotations, right? I don't need you to actually use the source in your reflection to make your point. I just need you to tell me how this source will be used to make the point in the paper, right? So that, again, I noted that that was a pitfall in potential proposals. It's also a potential pitfall in your annotations, that you end up making the argument that should be in the body of your paper when you're trying to either outline in your proposal or evaluate in your annotation. So one of the best things to do really for the annotated bibliography is take a look at some examples. So I have these from previous semesters. So they're going to be highlighted for summary, analysis, reflection. So let's say you have your works cited. Now my font's a little big here so that you can see it better. You have your works cited or references at the top, just like you would any other time at the end of your paper. And I've also continued my hanging indent, right? I've got my formatting and MLA as I would, and literally at the period at the end of my citation, I continue the paragraph of my annotation. The annotation is part of the citation at this point. So that's why the hanging indent continues. That's why it's on the same line where the citation continues. So my 1 to 2 sentence summary. Jarvie argues against the use of trigger warnings due to the subjective nature and excessive breadth of topics. She particularly takes issue with how it allows students to avoid material and abuse the system. That's her main points. That's all I need. Then I go to my analysis. So this is essentially the credibility or quality of her as a source. Jarvie does, however, demonstrate a biased view as she neglects positive attributes of trigger warnings and sarcastically admonishes university for their use, though she does take on a contemporary issue and provide several examples of university and student behavior to support her criticism. So I'm looking at her methodology and her tone and bias, right? So then reflection, what do I get out of the source? Within my essay, Jarvie becomes the representative to the anti-trigger warning position that I also hold and establish with her reasoning on the futility, I'll fix this later, and establish with her reasoning on the futility of the prediction reaction, her reasoning on the futility of predicting reactions, as well as she's a resource in the history and background of such warnings. So that's what I get out of her. I use her for background. I borrow this premise, and she becomes a representative of this as I engage with this, right? So, and then I just go to my next source, and I do the same thing. Again, I do my formatting. I continue my hanging indent. My paragraph begins immediately after my citation ends, because again, it stays part of the citation. Again, I have 1 to 2 sentences of summary. I analyze in my reflection. Johnston tackles outside perspectives on trigger warnings, which I can utilize to give balance to my argument. He also represents a unique point of view as someone who is in charge of implementing trigger warnings. So that's what I get out of him. It's different than what I get out of Jarvie, and it should be. All of your sources should be doing something different, unless the point goes back to something like synthesis. By using these 2 sources, I can actually do this, in which case your reflection might reframe back to another source. That's fine. So one of the things that I know you're concerned about is length. So for instance, if I check my length here, and again, I'm only counting the length of the paragraph, I'm at 118 words, well over the minimum. If I go to Johnston and count my length, I'm at 104. So notice that again, if you do 1 to 2 sentences for each of the 3 sections, length and word count should not be an issue, right? So again, once you have all 8, you can either just attach this as you would your normal works cited, or you can copy it into its own file and submit it separately. Again, either is fine. I just need to make sure it's included somewhere. So Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me. And of course, the copy of this is on Blackboard with near the video under class notes and materials. Okay, I'll see you later.